Okay, when I think of coaching a team to solve problems on their own, okay, the first thing that comes to my mind is the word recognition. First of all, do I as a coach perceive they have a problem? Do I have enough perception of things that are going on in and around the team to detect that something is going not quite in favor of the things the team would like to do? Teams are really no different, except you're now in an environment where the cultural norms are being applied from within this particular organization. Number one. Plus, when you enter into relationship, exchange with someone, you have a different set of expectations. In an organization where you're both working together, the expectations are we're trying to achieve whatever outcomes this company is paying us to achieve. Okay, and so that underlies a motivation there, that your understanding of what that motivational outcome needs to look like, is probably quite different than theirs.
Are your team's interactions and challenges hindering their progress? Today, we explore the art of coaching teams to resolve their own conflicts and problems. Learn practical strategies and techniques to empower your team to resolve conflicts, improve collaboration, and enhance their overall performance. To talk more about it, we have Marcelo Lopez as our guest today. Marcelo is an enterprise agile coach and certified Scrum trainer from Scrum Alliance. Marcelo supports, encourages, and mentors new engineers. He is known to solve problems out of norms. With his varied organization and industry experiences, he has gathered tools to solve problems differently. Tune in to discover how you can guide your team towards a more cohesive, productive, and successful agile journey. So without further ado, let's get started.
Hello, Marcelo. Welcome back to the podcast by Agile Coaching Roundtable. Yet again, it's great pleasure and fun having a conversation with you as always. So, welcome back. And today we want to have a conversation around the topics, a simple topic. How do we coach teams in solving their own problems, right? So, even before we start the conversation, how are you doing, Marcelo, to begin with?
Awesome. Great topic, actually. And I want to say thank you to both you, Rami, and you, Vivek. I'm looking to the right because she's on the right and you're on the left, Vivek, just so you
Yes.
know. So, yeah. So I want to say thank you to both of you for having me back a second time. Well, actually, no, this would be the third time, right? Because we had the
Yes,
recording.
Yes.
We had the recording with a bunch of the past, the past guests, and I want to say a shout out to all of them, and hope everybody's doing well. It's been a while, and hopefully we'll get together and put the band back together again soon and continue
Yes,
that
today I was
conversation.
thinking about that. I
Awesome.
was thinking about just today.
I think that's a great idea. We did explore a lot of things there, and we actually had a conversation with each other afterwards about collaborating a little bit more. Things got in the way towards the end of the year and stuff as the holidays approach, and you know how things happen. But hopefully that will circle back around. But to just dive right into it, okay. When I think of coaching a team to solve problems on their own, okay, the first thing that comes to my mind is the word recognition. First of all, do
Mhm.
I as a coach perceive they have a problem? Do I have enough perception of things that are going on in and around the team to detect that something is going not quite in favor of the things the team would like to do? Do I see things? Okay. Am I observant enough? Am I perceptive enough of detecting, even up until the point where you're the problem? Okay, but you see what I mean? So are you
Yes,
able to
yes,
detect that sort of stuff, to even to the point of, are you the problem itself, or contributing to a problem? All right. And so I start with the word perception and recognition. Do you observe that there is a problem, or there problems? Let's be open-ended. Okay. Or not necessarily even problems, but so much as things not going in the favor of the things the team and team members want to do. You can extend that also to the organization as a whole, but if we're going to focus on working with a group of individuals that have decided to come together to pursue a shared goal, and we want to call that a team, then so be it. So first, detection by recognition, perception of what the environment is going on, in which case am I using all my full faculties to observe what's happening, and then ask yourself several questions about, what am I seeing? Okay. Are there any biases that I'm using to detect things? If so, what might those be? Because they could either help or hinder in your abilities to help. Okay. If in fact
correct.
something needs to be helped. Okay. And sometimes, and here's the other thing. Okay. Sometimes we encounter things where, and this is a really challenging thing for even an experienced coach. Okay. is is the thing that I am detecting something that needs my intervention? And I'm going to use that word blanket. Okay. I'm not going to say what kind of intervention, but I'm just going to use
Correct.
the word as a blanket. Does it need my intervention now? Okay. Kind of like, when you're facilitating and you're observing what's going on in the interactions. I tend to use three questions. If I see something that I feel this need to say something, I say, does this need to be said? Does this need to
Mhm.
be said by me? And does this need to be said by me now? Okay. So as a coach, you
Wow.
you you may ask yourself, well, shoot, is this something that I need to intervene? Does it need intervention? Does it need intervention by me? And does it need intervention by me now? Okay. So
Okay.
starting from that position, okay, it helps to do some sort of assessment on your own of what you're seeing and what you're perceiving about it, before you necessarily step into bringing something forth, if you've passed the filter of the three questions. Okay. Before the team. Okay. And so
Mm-hmm.
you do some sort of situational analysis, if you will. Apply some critical thinking. Use the tools at your disposal about your understanding about the work environment that the team's working in, the tools that they're working in, the processes that they're using. If they're using some particular framework, is the situation of applying this framework contributing to this thing that you're seeing? Is it a misapplication of this framework that they're using, or method, contributing to the situation that you're seeing? And so you do some sort of internal analysis on your own. In other words, okay, it's kind of like detective work. Before you bring a case before the
Mhm.
court, you have to acquire your evidence of the situation, that is, this is not right, or
Well put.
this is not working well. So you acquire evidence, you gather the evidence yourself, and then you bring it before the persons who can perform a further judgment on the situation, to let them decide for themselves, does this in fact fit the criteria that we understand for us to give further analysis to and assess some actions that we might undertake. Okay. That, however, assumes they already know this sort of kind of thinking, this sort of critical thinking sort of process. Okay. Now, mind you, if we're talking about an environment, let's use for a second software development. Okay. Presumably,
Mhm.
software developers, QA engineers, business analysts have learned a measure of critical thinking in the specific domain of the overall environment of work they're doing. In other words, a BA knows how to decompose some requirement well enough that it's understandable by some other
Correct.
person. Okay. A
Right.
user interface or user experience person knows how to convey a flow of user interaction enough that some other person can interact and be able to ask questions so that they arrive at some sort of shared understanding. They carry, presumably, that amount of knowledge. This is different than that. This sort of what I'll call meta thinking, okay, or critical thinking
Mhm.
analysis is outside of that specific domain, but it's related to it. Okay. So one of the things that a coach may need to do is have a sense of their team, the people that they are working with, and recognize what kind of engagement, again, I'm going to use the blanket word of intervention, is most helpful to them. Okay. Are they experienced enough in their own journey of applying this sort of critical thinking for themselves that I can simply expose it to them for what it is and leave them to their own devices? Or does it require a different modality of more hands-on? And I'm making this motion specifically of more hands-on educational or active coaching. In other
Correct.
words, do I need to educate them on some of the ways that I have learned myself on applying some causal analysis to problems that we see? Okay. Or do I, if they have some skills in practicing these before, and perhaps they have not become skilled enough, I'm not going to use the word mature, I'm simply going to call it skilled enough, practiced enough in it, that I can again present it to them and perhaps recommend ways that they could apply practices that they've already learned. Okay. Or if they have practiced enough, become practitioners enough that they can take on their own due diligence, that once they are presented with some information and they have an awareness of it, and if it passes their filter of, wow, we may not have noticed this may have passed our detection, but thank you, we got this, then they can take it on. And so those are
Correct.
different approaches to help them. And you would apply different ones depending on the environment, the team members, and the situation. Okay. Because
Very
because you have a particular, what people will call, hey, I've got a mature, a high performing team, there may be aspect of their interactions which still may be haphazard, not very orderly, not very structured, that may require you to lean in further and apply a more educational modality. Okay. That's another
right.
challenge of a coach, because even as a coach, you generate biases of yourself, right? If you've been with a team
Absolutely.
for a while, you have a set form of interaction with them, and you don't want to delude yourself either that just because they've taken the ball and run with it in the past, this particular situation is the same as other situations you've had, and you can, I'm not going to say divest yourself, but you can step back further at any point in time. You may need to lean in further or back away. And this is a differential of a coach, where once you've gained some experience, okay, you can learn for yourself what sort of intervention is most useful in this situation to this set of people we're calling a team. I know I talked for a long time, so I'm going to shut
Yeah.
up now.
No, I think as a starting point, this is really amazing. Maybe I'm trying to understand one, the perception that is important. Other thing is the recognition. The third one is maybe the intervention, and also self-assessment, or maybe looking at yourself in the mirror, if I call it in that way. No, what are you thinking about? What is your assumptions? What are your validations, right? And that becomes so much important for an individual when you get into an coaching aspect or an opportunity of helping teams move from one direction, and as you said, Remy, uh, a high performing team, right? Or not even a high performing team, a team which is just starting off new. How do you help them? How do you ensure that they take the right steps or the right decisions, or they move into the direction that they want to get involved,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
as a starting point, I think for this podcast, this is really on a good note, I would say. I have a very simple question. I'm not sure whether it's a simple or it's what it is. On a coaching opportunity, where, as you said, an individual grows on based on the experience that he is going through, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you see, or how do you ensure that when you get into a coaching opportunity with team or multiple teams together or the individuals, what should be your starting point? I mean, in the same particular situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you solve team's problem? What
Well,
should be your starting point over here?
hmm, my my starting point looks at it from the interpersonal position. Okay, it's just like any relationship.
Absolutely.
You met this girl named Ramya. Something about her. You want to know her more. Well, what's a good way to know her more? To carry some knowledge of interpersonal reactions and interactions within yourself. Okay, you carry some understandings of cultural norms, which you both have been imbued with. Okay, but in an environment, and so you tend to organically generate conversations based off of the things that you say, the things she responds back, going back and forth, the things she probes to you about, and the way you respond back, and that generates a response back from her, and you learn together that way as individuals. Teams are really no different, except you're now in an environment where the cultural norms are being applied from within this particular organization. Number one. Plus, when you enter into relationship, exchange with someone, you have a different set of expectations. In an organization where you're both working together, the expectations are we're trying to achieve whatever outcomes this company is paying us to achieve. Okay, and
Correct.
so that underlies a motivation there, that your understanding of what that motivational outcome looks like, needs to look like, is probably quite different than theirs. And so to have some sort of shared understanding, a good place as any to start, okay, is to start sharing with each other different things about each other to the comfort level that which you are. Different cultures start off different ways. For example, at Lego and other places, I have a friend, Karsten Lutzen. Shout out to Karsten. All right. He's used something called the instruction manual to me. Okay.
Mhm.
In a culture where people are less reserved and more open to share things about each other, okay, they've been able, or would be able to apply something like the instruction manual to me metaphor to be able to convey those interpersonal, this is what I agree to, all right, so that you can interact with the other person, and so you share these sorts of things. Okay. What I find also very useful and it's especially useful in cultures that may not carry that openness, there may be perhaps a bit more reserved for whatever reasons, no judgments, but for whatever
Correct.
reasons. Okay. A different metaphor, commonly known as a working agreement or a social contract. I call it
I
a
was
working
about to
agreement.
say.
Yeah, I call it a working agreement instead of a social contract because a working agreement for me has a literal tie back to the fact that we're all in this organization because someone
Exactly.
writes us some piece of paper with a number on it on a regular and frequent basis as recompense for my energy devoted to some thing that this company wants to happen. Okay. So because of that, it's work. And so for me, a working agreement literally becomes a social contract for how we are going to work with each other. Okay.
Absolutely.
I don't make any illusions, Vivek, of that come 6 o'clock in the evening, we go out into where our vehicles are parked if we are coming into work vehicles or to the front door, and we do like this. We say nothing else. I make no illusions that when we walk out the building that we continue to walk this way. We could simply do that. But when we come into the building, because we establish this working agreement, we come to an understanding that this is how we're going to treat each other. These are some expectations that we will agree to have upon each other, okay, along with some mechanism to reinforce, or let me change the way, de-incentivize behaviors that aren't useful. I'm not going to say productive. I'm going to say useful. They're not useful. Okay.
Okay.
And the way that I put it together is actually really, really simple. It starts off with four things. Things that are, and I'm gonna, I'm gonna, I'm gonna show my age here. Okay. Back when I was your age, we had a language of using the word cool. Hey, that's cool. It means really good.
Hmm.
We really like that. Okay. And then when we didn't like something, Vivek, we'd say, not cool, bro. Not cool, bro.
Correct.
All right. Stuff
So,
just not gonna have it. Not, it's unacceptable. Right. And then that mechanism of de-incentivizing, for lack of a better phrase, I call it consequences. Okay.
Hmm.
Something that we mutually agree to that will by your demonstration and adherence to that consequence recognize that you are going to respect this team. Okay. Because a working agreement without some understanding of when you've broken the working agreement, you've impacted everyone adversely. Okay. It's going to be harder. It's going to be harder to establish and maintain that working agreement. Okay. And so whenever I've worked with a team and I've set a working agreement in place, I start off with a clear understanding. Vivek, Ramya, whatever you guys agree to hold each other to, whatever it is, I'm going to agree to.
Correct. Correct.
I may not like some of it. I may not like some of it. If I see something unethical in there, I may speak up about it. Okay? I may speak up about it. But whatever you finally come to an agreement to, I will agree to. There's one proviso with that blanket agreement. If you don't hold each other to the consequences, I will, as your coach, until you can demonstrate for yourselves that, hey, you got this. Okay. I will be that last line of defense for you to try to uphold the things that you've agreed to work together as a team by, whatever those rules are. I'm the last line of defense. If you don't feel safe
Oh,
to speak up about something that's not being upheld in that work agreement, you don't feel psychologically safe to speak up, I will be that road guard. Like you're driving down a road and you don't want the car to fall off into the ravine. I'll be that rail, that guardrail. Hopefully you learn how
correct.
to drive the car yourself so that you don't have to bump into the guardrail very often. Okay. Things get messy when that happens. Okay. And so that's how I approach that. And
Mm-hmm.
frankly, I think a lot of coaches, to their credit, use these ideas of working agreements.
Okay. Is it is it really important, or as you mentioned in the last point, and I would be the last line of defense. I mean, most of the time it becomes that a coach, is jumps onto a problem, or it jumps onto a situation which is getting out of control, maybe as a first person. Do you think
Mm.
that approach should be avoided? Uh, in most of the situations, that we should not get involved at a very beginning, or at a very starting point.
Almost
I'll
like a
say,
spoon feeding.
yeah, I'll
Yeah.
say, yeah. You know what one of the running jokes is, what is an agile coach's answer to every question? It depends. Well,
It depends.
this is
Yeah, it
clearly
depends. Yes.
a case where different coaches could make different arguments, and I could sort of understand their different arguments in those situations. All right, because again, if you don't know the people, you have to go on some bit of faith initially, at least, to not get involved. So this goes back to the very first question. You now start observing, hey, are things going well according to this working agreement that they've established? Why? Because literally, this is the first artifact that you've created as a team. This is their first artifact. If you're treating the team as a product, which I say as a coach, what is your product? A team. Okay, if you're a team coach, your product is a team. This is your first artifact. Are they treating this artifact properly? Are they taking care of it? Are they nurturing it? Are they upholding the quality of it? Okay, do they exhibit the self-awareness, the practice in taking care of their own working agreement? Okay, and this is a judgment call you as a coach have to be cognizant of. Apply your own self awareness. Are they using this working agreement to their benefit or not? Okay. And then judge for yourself if they, by your assessment, not. Okay. What sort of downstream impact is it having that they aren't applying it? For example, they're not applying it in their daily scrums. One person, two people talk, the rest don't. Okay. What downstream
True.
impact could that have? Okay. What sort of dysfunction could that be causing inside of the team? What purpose is it affecting? Okay. This is the kind of stuff that for example, we talk about in the dysfunction mapping class. Not to advertise in your podcast, but this is the sort of stuff that we talk about in that class to help Scrum Masters and coaches learn this sort of internal mechanism of assessing for yourself the things that are not functioning well according to a particular purpose that you're trying to achieve some goal around. Okay, so it depends on, are they upholding, in this case, their own agreement to a working agreement? Are they focusing on what purpose they're trying to achieve by working together? And then asking yourself what kind of intervention, what mode of intervention is most useful in this moment. That doesn't mean you'll toss it away. Maybe the answer to that filtering question is not right now, but maybe later. Maybe it's a
Hmm.
conversation, maybe later. And the later is not necessarily
Right.
open-ended either. Okay. It could be as later
Correct.
as 15, 20 minutes from now. It could be later in the day when you detect an opening to be able to have some side conversations with other individuals to perhaps probe a little bit about what's going on, and then judge for yourself if your own internal self assessment was accurate or not.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so that's
Yes.
kind of why it depends. That's kind of why it depends.
True. So when you said these things, right, Marcelo? So one of the things that I completely like agree on is first you mentioned about maybe understanding the teams, right? Understand the culture that they're coming from, how they react or how they respond to each other. Once you have that understanding of team members, how they do and what they do in particular situations, you pretty much kind of know that, okay, these are these kind of people and this is how we need to deal with them, right? And then you establish a working agreement so that
Mhm.
they will, you know for the fact that, okay, for this kind of a team or maybe with such a bunch of an individual, okay, you may want to maybe tweak your ways in terms of talking to them. Obviously,
Mhm.
your approach maybe talking to say A team might not be the same the way you would do for B team because their culture is different or the way of
Yep.
responding is different, right?
Mhm.
So this, I mean, brought me to this. I mean, this reminded me of a project that I was working. In fact, Vivek and I, we both were working recently wherein so we were called as an agile coaches for this particular project where everything was messed up. So there was already a scrum master, but nothing seems to be working because there were multiple vendors involved and multiple dynamics that were happening and going wrong.
Mhm.
So one of the important things that I understood was the team dynamics. And obviously, when we were asked to maybe give our own observations and all those things, right?
Mhm.
So we went there and we kind of observed things and all those things. So
Mhm.
just in like hardly 1 or 2 days, they were asking us to maybe give some observation or something like that. We said it is very, very nascent for us to give any sort of loopholes or observations because we need to know what is going around. We need to understand how the teams are
Yeah.
behaving and how they're
Mhm.
talking to each other. So observation is something
Mhm.
I think is very much important as a agile coach or maybe as a scrum master. If you're going into any
Yeah.
team, first what we need to do is first we need to observe, and
Mhm.
secondly, this is exactly what we kind of pointed out that after maybe talking to them or maybe having understanding of how the teams are responding and what they're doing, right? One of the critical things that was going off was team dynamics. So the Scrum Master was from some other vendor, the teams are from other vendor, and the client is some other entity altogether, and the
Mhm.
product owner is also from the client side. So there was no psychological safety, so to speak,
Mhm.
within the team members,
Yeah.
and team members were not open with
Yeah.
each other. There was pin drop silence whatsoever in the call,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
yet the Scrum Master was trying to defend teams. The point that
Mhm.
Vivek mentioned, right? Why should we be the last line of defense, right? What if
Mhm.
people go and become the first line of defense? That's exactly what the Scrum
Yeah.
Master was doing. And that is what even we were trying to make that Scrum Master understand. You know what? You don't have to speak every single time. You maybe observe, let them realize that they are
Mhm.
also having a problem. Maybe you
Mhm.
probe a bit, right? But if team
Mhm.
members are not picking up, maybe that's a different issue
Yeah.
altogether. I mean, you need to deal with it separately. But
Yeah.
then you jumping into the calls and saying, you know what, you're defending the team, where teams themselves are not speaking for themselves,
Mhm.
right? So that is something we should not
Yeah.
be doing, and that's why I relate when you say that you should be the last
Mhm.
line of defense, right?
Yeah.
So I think working agreements is something I completely, endorse, as almost endorse, right? I mean, in whichever teams I go, that you know what, this is what you need to establish because
Mhm.
every, as we say, right, every household has their own rules,
Mhm.
every
Yeah.
organization has their own rules, right? So
Mhm.
similarly, every team needs to have their own rules
Yep.
and they need to obey and agree to that, right? So that's where I think working agreement definitely helps,
Mhm.
right? And maybe to just ask you out of curiosity, see, we know that as a Scrum Master and Agile coach, we have observed and we have like kind of ticked all the questions that you have said, right? Whether we need to intervene here, whether you need to intervene, and whether you need to intervene now or not, right?
Mhm.
Even if you went past these questions, imagine you went to the team and you are maybe probing or talking about them. But what if they're not even realizing that there is this problem exists in the
Yeah.
teams, right? So how do we deal with this? I mean,
Yeah.
whether should we go
Well,
ahead or how do we deal with this?
well, as you were talking, You are describing a situation that Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, product owners, developers, and I'm using the phrase developers blanket across different skill sets, are finding themselves involved in more and more these days. Multiple teams fed by people from multiple supplier or vendor companies to a particular client company. Different company norms, company rules, governmental rules. Maybe they're in different countries, and so you have to treat people from different countries because they have different laws in those countries. What have I described? A big, hairy mess. What's the first thing you might want to do is draw out for yourself what this big, hairy mess looks like. Okay. I mean, think of explorers. You're exploring terrain. You've got different bits and things in the topology of the terrain. So in a sense, one of the first things as an explorer to understand, you might want to be a cartographer. You might want to draw out what the different topology of this terrain looks like. Okay. And assess what is before you react to what is. Okay. And here's the problem. The problem with this is that companies, and I'm gonna say this, and it might be a little bit confrontational for some folks, is that what companies really think they're hiring someone like you and I for? My experience says they don't know that that's what they're hiring us for, even if we know that that is part of what they are hiring us for. Does that make sense? Or
Yes.
organizations
Yes.
still by and large do not recognize this is part of what an agile coach does, what a scrum master might do, okay, probably should do, all right,
Yeah.
and yet they hire us for other things which may not really be what a scrum master or an agile coach should be for.
Exactly.
Okay. Yesterday there was a post on linked about from a friend of mine talking about what should be the involvement in human resources. I'm not a fan of that phrase for many historical reasons, but it is what it is. And so she had put out there asking what should there be involvement in it be, and these and agile transformations and quotes, what should their involvement be? And there's a still poll going on, so I'm not gonna go off into that tangent for the moment, but they should be involved. They are not necessarily outside here off to the corner. There is some involvement that they need to be involved, and there are things that we sh- hopefully should be able to do to help that function inside of the organization come to understand the question, what does an agile coach do again, Vivek? And for them to have an understanding of what that is. Because if they don't understand that in face to the situation that you just described, Ramya, that they might first want to cartographically lay out the topology of what is and what the interactions are between what it is before they start to think of where do I begin to bring this situation before others and let them recognize and start to decide for themselves what they think about this situation, and then probe
Mhm.
with questions to say, well, what do you guys think about this situation? Right.
Yeah.
There may very well be situations where the people themselves are not empowered to do something about it. That's something
Yes.
Correct.
that many of us have recognized. I don't think that what I've just described off of what the situation that you posed should surprise anyone who's been experienced at this for a while. Okay.
Mhm.
Now we start talking
Okay.
about, well then, wait a minute. If they're not empowered to do this, okay, where do we start? We start with the power structure of the organization. And let's be honest, the power structure in the organization comes from management.
Management,
Okay? And so
leadership.
Absolutely.
and so
Yeah.
their recognition of the answers to what does an agile coach again do, Vivek? What does a scrum master really do? That's where, again, their understanding, I'll say it this way, and I don't mean to be confrontational, judgmental, but this is where there could be a little bit of help. This is where
Mhm.
a clearer understanding of these questions could help a lot if management had the clarity in their minds as to what do these people do for us? What's their value proposition? Okay.
Mhm.
And you
Yeah.
got to think of it from this perspective. From their perspective, the business person is thinking about one word: results. Results.
Yes.
And then a
Yes.
lot of times
Yes.
we talk about outcomes over outputs. We could have a conversation about how we shift outputs to outcomes as the metaphor for results. Okay. But in their mind, this is how they're taught. This is what their experience has led them to think. They're thinking results. Okay. How do I
Mhm.
get to my
Yeah.
results? So, how we can convey that message of how do we get to our results from what does an agile coach do? What does a scrum master do? Okay, is where again we could apply some brain power and helping people understand. Sometimes it takes using not our own nomenclature. Sometimes it takes us not using our own jargon. Okay, if the word scrum is not helping, don't use the word scrum.
Don't use it. Yeah.
If the word kanban isn't helping, don't use the word kanban. Okay, if agile release train is not helping, it usually doesn't, but don't use it. Sorry, I had to throw in the joke. I had to get it in there somewhere. Anyway, anyway,
Okay.
anyway, the thing is this, is that, you know, if you can get the reality of what's going on visualized, visualized, and say, this is where I am seeing these interaction gaps are leading to situations where we're getting less than the kind of results which we'd ideally want. Okay, how can you help us get back to that, work backwards towards that? Okay, and then you get into those
Mhm.
situ and yeah, and then you get into the situations where you may have to, I'm not going to say just you, well, I'll say it, compromise. How much of towards the ideal results are you prepared to get to right now? That's a tough one for agile coaches. We're a very optimistic thinking lot. We are. We like to think that this is something that people would want. Of course, people want better ways of things. Who would not want? The funny thing is that people, we're funny. We have all sorts of weird motivations. Okay. And as I like to, yeah, and as I like to say, even in pursuit of uncovering better ways, all it takes is one bad actor. You've heard the phrase, how many apples does it take to spoil the bunch?
Correct.
Okay. All it
Correct.
takes is, yeah, all it takes is one bad actor in a particularly placed position for it to all come down. Right? And so
Mhm.
this is another reality that we have to confront as agile coaches, scrum masters, developers, product owners. You may be a product owner that's really, working with your stakeholders, your management to try to get your team what they need. Listening to your scrum master or your agile coach, trying to make sure that the team has the support that they need, trying to make better decisions, learning yourself how to be a better product owner. And yet you could have that one stakeholder who keeps, just interjecting them with the other stakeholders and derails them. And so you can't get clear strategic insights into what's going on. And so what are you to do as a product owner? Ay caramba. And so what do you do as this? What do you do as a Scrum Master, as an Agile coach in that sort of situation? Okay, you deal with the situation as you encounter it. All right. So the thing that I do, the thing that I recommend and coach others towards doing is, in all things, keep it real. I don't know if you guys have heard that phrase around, but keep it real. And what does that mean?
Yes.
What that means very simply is, you know, that cartographical layout of how things look, keep it
Yeah.
up to date.
Yes.
Keep it up
Mm.
to date. Keep a historical record of the individuals and interactions.
Mm.
Okay.
Yes.
Does that mean you collect a stack of notebooks? Maybe that's what it means. Maybe that's what it means. Okay. That's what it meant for me. I kept, you know, those sorts of composition notebooks you'd get in school that had the lines, and
Yeah.
it had, it had the little square where this is, this is my notebook, this is my grade, this is my, this
Yeah.
is my
Yes.
group, or batch,
Yes.
this is where you kept your notebooks, and sometimes you had to give it to the teacher. Well, if that's what it means, that's what it means. That's what I actually kept. So when I encountered situations where people were being that one funny person, I always had that notebook. I said, well, actually, folks, if it was called for in that moment, okay, because you want to keep your interactions respectful, not keeping it personal, but you say, well, my understanding about what the situation was at that time is blank, and I wrote it down. Becomes harder once someone has something in writing, because then you're
Yes.
fighting
Mm-hmm.
memory versus something recorded, you know
Yes.
and,
You have
and
facts.
yeah. And so I use that to my benefit. Okay, you could say, well, Marcelo, are you using that for good, or are you using that as a coercive mechanism? You could have an interesting
How does it
conversation.
matter?
Yeah, you could have an interesting conversation around that. My answer would be is, uh, are we that afraid of reality that we can't record it? You can have a conversation if my recollection when I was writing it was right or not. The fact is, over time, if your recollection was accurate, if your narrative of what was going on was clear and honest enough, it'll speak for itself. It'll speak for itself. Okay. And so this relies
Yeah.
back to your own personal ethics and so on and so forth. But I would say, start off with understanding what is, look at what's going on, okay? Draw a picture of the reality of what it is, okay? Using the tools that you have. If a team you're interacting with has a working agreement, start off with, are they keeping to it as well as they can? Okay. Do other teams, do they have working agreements? Are they keeping up to it as well as they can? Okay, find out the answers to those sorts of questions. If they're not able to keep up to them well, okay, ask them why they think they can't keep up to it well, and just be open about it. Okay,
Absolutely.
some of the stuff could be them. Some of the stuff could be the environment. Right, and so you may want to then probe and turn around and say, well, okay, rather than pointing fingers and things like that, is it really, why is it? Okay, again, the,
Yeah.
the intent is to act as a detective in that sense, and help them
Mm-hmm.
learn how to detect the things that are in their sphere of influence for the moment, and the things that are outside of their sphere of influence, but that they could amass their own evidence towards
Yeah.
helping those in that other sphere of influence alleviate to whatever measure they can. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll share
Mhm.
with you a little bit from my own experience when I encountered a situation not unlike that, Ramya. One of the things that I found was that, yeah, we had these working agreements in these teams, the Scrum Master had set up these things, but they didn't have working agreements between the teams. These 5 teams in this particular train did not have a
Mhm.
train working agreement. And I'm like, supposedly you all are going on this is a presumed shared goal, and you don't have any shared agreement between the lot of you as to how you're going to support each other on this journey? Does anybody see a potential pothole in this roadway? Is this something we might want to have a conversation around? Let me know. Okay. Either that or at some point people might want to jump off the train. I'm just saying. Okay. And so I left it to their good, their good intentions to ask themselves that question. Because sometimes it's just a matter of asking that provocative question and saying, I'm here. If you guys want to do this, would you like to do this before we get too far down the road? Because at some point, if we encounter that might be a little bit harder to deal with unless we've given it a little bit of thought ahead of time. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like putting money into an account to save up for that rainy day. Okay. The sooner that we put away the money and it starts to draw interest between us, the bigger the balance will be should that expense be incurred.
Yeah.
You encounter that problem, and you go say, well, management, we need assistance, we need some help. The obvious question is going to be, well, what did you guys do for yourselves? What have you tried already?
Yes.
Is not an answer. Is probably not going to be really helpful in that situation. Going to them, well, we've had this working agreement between us in place. Here's how we've tried to mitigate it, applying this working agreement. Here are the sorts of things that we've tried. Here's some of the outcomes that we've got. Oh, wow. Okay. Now it becomes harder for management to ignore, because if you've done your due diligence and you've generated evidence, oh, wait a minute. Yeah. Kinda will reflect on me if I don't demonstrate leadership. Okay. And so now that turns the conversation into a different sphere as to what they could then do. But you as a coach, you as a Scrum Master, you as team members, you did your due diligence.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is what I usually talk about, or maybe this is what I always maybe whenever you assess or get into a situation, trying to, as you mentioned it, what you have tried till now, and then while doing that, what are the different options, or maybe certain data facts or patterns that we call upon, right? Like the patterns that you observe. What are your observations around that? How you have assessed based on that pattern? How did you make certain kind of decision, if you could make out of those patterns or data points, is what maybe the management or the leadership would like to get to know from you, rather than the or o kind of responses that yeah. Right.
Yeah. Hey, if you've got hard numbers, Vivek, it's hard to argue.
Yes.
It's hard to argue with numbers. I mean, you can have the conversation about, well, how accurate are you and this and that, in which case that comes into how you do your due diligence to acquire your data. Okay, any scientific study is only as good as the formation of the study, the parameters of the study, the setup of the study, and then how well you do to acquire and maintain your data, the validity, the cleanliness of the data, of course. But once you've got that, it becomes much harder to deal with. I had this conversation with someone actually just yesterday, that it kind of becomes difficult to argue with numbers when in your mind you say, Vivek, I needed $100 because I really needed to go do this thing with $100. But I went up to the machine, and when I put in my information into the machine told me that I couldn't take the $100, Vivek, and then you say, well, why was the machine not wanting to give you the $100? It kept telling me that my balance was 20. And you in your mind are thinking to yourself, Okay, there's something to have a conversation around. It becomes hard to argue with a number because the number doesn't care. The number just is.
Yes.
Okay,
Those are facts.
yeah, if you're getting, let's say, work from, and I'm not making any, casting any aspersion on anybody, but you're getting something delivered from a vendor that you're having to treat as a black box. Okay. And despite your better efforts, and let's say you're doing your due diligence to document things, Vivek's documenting things, he's getting data from his team, he's helping his team assess that the data that they're amassing is correct, not just from out of thin air, not just we feel like, no, it's accurate, it's clear, and it's accurate. But despite your better efforts, you continually have to clean up after the fact the deliverables. The incurred defects continue to come in, and you've had some interactions with the, maybe even some interventions with the supplier of this work. Well, when you run into a problem where it's just unsustainable, it's just not going to, they come to you, Vivek, there's no way. We can't continue to work like this. 40% of our time, 30% of our time is spent cleaning up, trying to clarify what's going on, documenting the things because we have to document, because so and so forth says we have to document them. And you've documented. This is how much of the capacity of the team is being consumed. Okay. You can turn that into dollars and cents. When you show that to management, okay, and they see it in terms of dollars and cents, kind of hard for them to ignore. Okay. And so some people might say, well, is this something an agile coach should do? Is this something a Scrum Master should do? And I'm like, it's very simple. We are uncovering better ways by doing it and helping others to do it. If they can then own doing it for themselves, great. But if they haven't learned to do this for themselves, what should an agile coach do? What should a Scrum Master do? This now leads into the topic of what does an agile coach do, which is, as I understand it, a conversation that some people have started to ask themselves a fair bit, and there's been a lot on my mind lately. So I don't know if you guys are ready to jump into that conversation, or if you had something else that you guys wanted to talk about.
Not really. So Marcelo, what I wanted to, I mean, this would be, I know, a very ugly plugin over here. But then the point that you mentioned about the value proposition, what a Scrum Master do or an Agile coach do, or how do we even show our value proposition to the management in terms of data, right? That's where Vivek and I, we both are kind of working, or maybe we have put up a tool called Agile Catalyst tool, wherein we have come up with some different competencies and sub-competencies wherein we are going to measure teams on, right? It could be as simple as, say, value delivery, customer satisfaction, customer engagement, so on and so forth. There are many such competencies. That is where we would say that instead of management, instead of going to the situation where management says, or even when you say, right, what did you do? Where are you showing the results, right? I mean, what all things have you tried till now, and whether it is working or not? This is where the competencies or the ACT tool will help, saying that, you know what, these are the competencies that you need to check, because these are not, say, a Scrum framework per se, or maybe a SAFe or Kanban per se. It's like Agile in general, right? In line with the principles and values. So we have built this the tool, ACT tool, in line with the Agile manifesto, which will measure against different competency and say, okay, this team, okay, in terms of this competency, this is what is going wrong. This is what it is, and this is how it should be. So we will be maybe showing with the results, as you mentioned that you document, right? That whatever is happening. So this competency will help, or this tool will help agile coaches or scrum masters or agile practitioners in general. It could be even project managers, whoever who is working in agile setup.
So for any agile practitioners, what we have planned is, so maybe we will say where these teams are standing in terms of these competencies, and we will say, okay, this is the case, and this is what they are standing at, and this is where you need to move. This is all what we need to fix. So in a way, what we're trying to show is we are obviously telling what is the current situation. At the same time, we're also showing our own value. Okay, this is what we are bringing in. These are the things that we have done so far. These are the things that we need to improve on, right? So maybe when you talk about how we are showing our value as a scrum master and what ways we have tried, obviously everyone will have their own ways. Okay, this is what it is and this is what we have measured. Maybe this is what we are trying to bring in this act tool, wherein we say, okay, these are the things that you need to measure. And that would be true for any agile project or any teams, for that matter.
Yeah. Because this is a whole other conversation, because we see a lot of these agile maturity assessments out there. Again, ay caramba. How often they have daily scrums? Are their daily scrums 15 minutes? These are not maturity assessment things. These are things that a team wanting to use Scrum surely needs some assistance. But if the team is not performing to what the organization needs them to deliver, let's be blunt, all right? If the work that the team is undertaking, notice I said undertaking, I didn't say was given, was told to do, the work that the team is undertaking of their own volition, okay? And I'm including the product owner in here, because garbage in, garbage out. If they are not, or product manager, if they are not undertaking work that is resulting in something useful to the organization, okay, that is the single most important metric. Why? Because they're being given money to do something. At the end of the day,
Correct.
they are employed for a purpose of achieving some organizational goal. So working your way back there, okay, what are the things that are measurable towards that? Velocity is not one of them either, folks. I'm sorry to burst some people's bubble. Velocity is not that. Velocity is not that. That is not that is. Story points, that is not that. Okay?
Absolutely.
Throughput, that is not that. All of those are outputs. What sort of business measurable things is this team achieving? Okay? And is the team able to achieve these things? And then you could work back from there. What sorts of things are you as an agile coach or scrum master contributing to make it possible for the team to achieve that? Okay. For example, a team that is always infighting, always arguments between Vivek and Marcelo. Vivek is the head of QA, Marcelo is the lead developer, and they're always butting heads because of something or another. Marcelo, you can't just throw things over the fence 2 days before the end of the sprint. My God, my testers can't get feedback back to the developers in that period of time. You don't understand how complex our system is, Vivek. You just don't know. And you're faced with that sort of situation. Okay? Have you helped the team solve for those sorts of pesky problems? And then what came of it? And then as a scrum master, agile coach, whoever, did you document it? Did you document your contribution towards helping resolve that
issue?
Because that now can have some sort of impact downstream towards, are we getting the outcomes that we want? Okay, and that is one of a slew of different dysfunctions. Sorry, I had to slide that back in there. Slew of dysfunctions, which you could turn around and flesh out into a map and try different sorts of experiments with your team, with those involved. Okay. And this should be a collaborative thing. This is not Marcelo playing mad
Absolutely.
scientist. This is
Yes,
Vivek.
yes.
We're not playing with lab rats. That's not our team. They're humans, please. Okay. So we include them in this. Any investigation we do, we include them in this and let them draw their own observations and scrutinize this sort of stuff and say, well, that suggestion's pretty good, Marcelo, but maybe we could try this first. Maybe we could try this first, and let Marcelo and Vivek hug it out. And then you'll see the developers and the testers going by and say, oh my God, I'm so happy they solved that. Because they've been asking
Yeah.
themselves too, why can't these two just sort it out?
Yes.
Why can't they sort it out? And whatever solution they come up with together, not just the two of them maybe, but the whole lot of them, they can feel more comfortable with, because guess what? Whatever solution you come up with goes back to that very first artifact that we talked about at the very beginning. Because that working agreement
Because
thing, oh yeah, that's a living document. That's not like a microwave. Hey, cook it for 30 seconds, Vivek, it'll be perfect. What? You open up the box and go, Marcel, I think this is still frozen. It needs a little more time to
yes.
cook. Okay, maybe we might want to have taken it out of the box first, because it's not looking good. Okay, it's meant to be iterated. How often? We can have an interesting conversation of how often you would iterate a working agreement, but certainly the situation where we're trying to solve this disparity between our software developers and our QA folks, that's certainly one of those situations. Because now if
Yeah.
we agree to different interactions between the individuals to uncover a better way, we should keep it somewhere so we don't forget.
Wow,
Ooh.
amazing. I think this is what we wanted to talk about today, obviously. So we have covered so many points, right? I think this is kind of a coaching class for the Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, because these are the things, right? People tend to miss, and they try to jump into the conversation as an Agile coach or a Scrum Master and try to fix things up. Or this is wrong, and this is what you should be doing, and this is how it should be doing, almost like a dictative kind of a thing. But yes, I mean, this is what we wanted to have a conversation on. So thank you so much, Marcelo, for coming
You're
over
welcome.
and doing this podcast with us yet again. And
Cool.
we
Anytime.
really enjoyed, and we really have fun having a conversation with you. And you are always a sport to have any kind of stupid conversations with us. So thank you so much for coming
You're
over and
welcome.
doing this podcast with us.
No, you're welcome. Yeah, these are all incredible questions. One of the things that I'm thinking as a result of this is, with your permission, when you guys post this, I'm going to post to this very podcast. Actually, I want them to start listening to your podcast as a thing that since you have folks like myself, Dave Smith, Patty Luzowitz, and Anthony and many others. I know that I'm forgetting a bunch of people. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everybody.
Michael Lloyd, how can you forget him?
Michael Lloyd,
He'll kill you.
Patricia,
Julie.
Julie, yes, thank you. Again, I'm forgetting people, but thank you for helping me there. So that my students can get an even more well-rounded perspective from different practitioners, because it's one of the things I love about your podcast is you guys cast a wide net. You cast a wide net, and as that one podcast where we were all on, you can see that we agree on many things, we disagree on a few others. We disagree on a few
Yes.
Yes.
others. Some very much, in disagreement. But the idea behind that is to get exposed to this spectrum of different perspectives.
Perspectives.
We don't want to necessarily live in our own echo chamber. Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to necessarily
Absolutely.
live
Yes.
in our own echo chamber. We all have to come out of our hole, so to speak, and look around and explore and stuff. So thank you again for having me. It's always fun, to hang out with you guys. And this was great fun, great exploration. I'll certainly look forward to it in the future, and look forward to that next invitation.
100.
Absolutely. We would love to have you again. Thank you so much, Marcelo.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching this episode patiently till the end. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll meet you again in the next episode. Till then, if you like our podcast show, then do like, share, subscribe, and let us know your feedback in the comment section. You can also listen to the episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. Thank you.